Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin, and today my group and I are going to be going through the 4 waves of American feminism. We're going to really lay down the foundation of American feminism as a movement and really provide insight into the history of our nation and the traditional values that it was built upon. You're going to notice in the first wave throughout the 19th century that the American culture was really rooted in racism and sexism, and it snowballs and really shows itself throughout the waves as we go through. When you're talking about the feminism movement, it's really important to understand the definition. Feminism is the political, economic, and social equality of sexes. It is not for the advancement of only females. It is for all gender equality. The rise of feminism in Western culture was due to the lack of legal rights in the 19th century. Throughout the feminist movement, many women have worked together to try to work toward the advancement of all women's rights, but unfortunately, still many women in the intersections of American society were left in the shadows. To this day, we still notice that many marginalized women in America are fighting for basic social and legal rights. As our group takes you through the waves, Chris is going to hit on how women gained the right to vote, but that was a majority of white women. So the second wave of feminism, which Karla is going to touch on, is really going to hit on many different social reforms and anti-discrimination laws that came to fruition. And then Sienna is going to hit on the third wave, the how feminism was really reclaimed and intersectionality was brought into the mix. It was really inclusive and inspired the fourth wave when technology arose to really put inclusivity to the forefront. And I'll discuss that more when we conclude. As we go through, we're going to hit on some important moments in history, some important women, and many other different things that really helped shape modern day feminism. And here's Chris as he goes to the first wave.
So the first wave of feminism focused on the basic rights of women, one big one being the right to vote, and other ones were focused on being able to gain custody over their children and being able to get divorced. The very big step for women's rights was the Seneca Falls Convention, which was led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucia Dumont, which consisted of 100 men and women, basically just talking about the Declaration of Sentiments, which was basically what women believe they should have. The 15th Amendment allowed men of color to vote, but there was still a split between there. As you can see, the American Women's Suffrage Association opposed the 15th Amendment, while the National Women's Suffrage Association supported the 15th Amendment. The women's suffrage movement became white-centric, which eventually led women of color to create their own path. Racism and sexism were very big during this time. Even all women, all races, all colored had no political, social, economic, or legal rights. Black reformers also knew that their race kind of affected them and available opportunities. So white suffragists kind of avoided bringing race into their campaigns, which resulted in female reformers of color beginning like their own organizations. A very big win was in 1920 when the 19th Amendment was passed, which granted women the right to vote. As you can see, we're celebrating the 100 years of women's suffrage. But one big thing during this time was that women of color were still left out.
Now, the second wave, this wave had a more radical voice, and as opposed to the first wave, this wave tried to achieve equality in society. The first wave focused more on a political equality. Now, the rallying slogan, "The personal is political," came from Carol Hanish's essay, which stated that individual problems such as sex and relationships are connected to social and political structures. Now, the second wave started with Betty Friedan's book. Now, the feminine mystique is what sparked and ignited the second wave. Now, this book talked about the problem with no name. It explained that the fault didn't truly lie in women, but within American systems that restricted women to exercising their intellectual thinking and told them that you basically belong in the house. Now, the book was not revolutionary because of its ideas. The ideas were already being talked about in academics. It was revolutionary in its reach. It sold 3 million copies in 3 years, and it just made its way into the many homes of housewives. Now, the second wave had many historic victories. As you can see here are some of them as I listed below. And some of these Supreme Court cases are still being talked today in the media. You might be familiar with Roe versus Wade. Now, even though the second wave had many victories, it also had flaws. The ending of the second wave came with the Reagan era, which portrayed women as angry, hairy, legged shrews who hated men. Now, this image of feminism would continue to haunt them throughout the third wave and today. Now, the second wave focused on social equality, but it excluded many people of color, and that is one of the flaws that it had. So when a wave has a problem and there's no solution to it, a new wave will emerge. Now, the third wave would emerge to solve the problems that the second wave created.
So the third wave of feminism began in the early 1990s, and this wave really involved women fighting against sexual harassment in the workplace, as well as creating a way to increase the number of women in political power, and also to have that inclusivity that the second wave lacked. And it starts off with the rise of the Riot Girl Manifesto. So in the early 90s, women in the Pacific Northwest area realized that there was a lack of representation of punk rock bands that were primarily women. Instead, it was mostly men. So they decided to start forming bands that would celebrate sexuality, women's anger, and really start to give rise to this third wave of feminism and reclaim those terms that were initially viewed as bad, like being called a girl. They wanted to make sure that that was actually a good thing. Instead of being called women, they really focused on being called girl. Anita Hill was extremely monumental during this wave. Basically, what happened in her case was that she testified against a Supreme Court nominee named Clarence Thomas that he had sexually harassed her at work. Now, despite this accusation, he made his way to the Supreme Court anyway. But this testimony really sparked an avalanche of other women's sexual harassment complaints nationwide, which then moves to women not being silent anymore. So because of the decision to send Thomas Hill to the Supreme Court anyway, a lot of effects happened because of this. Bills were passed that gave the sexual harassment victims rights to seek federal damage, back pay, and reinstatement. As a result, the year after, 50% of harassment complaints were filed, and companies really started to develop training programs that deterred this type of behavior at work. Now, the year of 1992 was dubbed Year of the Women because this is when women really started to take charge in politics. So 24 women won seats in the House of Representatives and 3 more won seats in the Senate. And this marked the beginning of the next 20 years of women's achievements. So the third wave also really focused on intersectionality. So basically, the second wave focused on white women that were middle class, and this wave really focused on including everybody regardless of their race and class. So and that included women of color. And they really wanted to challenge the definition of feminism. So from that, we would see a new wave emerge in the fourth wave.
So the fourth wave was really rooted in the technological revolution that took place in the early 2000s. With the rise of social media giants like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, women and people in general were really able to communicate and organize in a way that they never were able to before. The feminist movement really pivoted their activism onto the interweb. They really highlighted sexual assault awareness, body positivity, and overall representation and inclusivity of all people. Below are some of the popular movements that are still taking place today. Another goal of fourth wave feminism was to stand against the privilege that has protected men in power and the lack of belief of survivors that has been insidious throughout American culture. Me Too and Time's Up are two women empowerment movements that really revolutionized and moved the needle on the conversation for women's issues. Me Too was a phrase that was used and coined by Tiana Burke in 2006 as a way to help survivors and sexual assault victims share their stories in solidarity. However, in 2017, the Me Too movement hashtag really gained momentum when people were being called out for sexual harassment and sexual misconduct, most notably American comedian Bill Cosby, Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein, and nomination of now Justice Brett Kavanaugh in 2018. So the Time's Up movement really arose as an action-oriented step to really take steps to create concrete change on issues that were brought up throughout these pivotal movements. Another huge thing in our history is the Women's March. Millions of women and people of all backgrounds gathered March of 2017 to stand for the gender equality, civil rights, and many other issues that were sought to face challenges under Donald Trump's presidency. It's known as the biggest organized march and gathering in US history. Despite all of the advancements we've made towards women's rights throughout the past 100 years, many women in America are still fighting for equal rights. In fact, voter suppression is super real to this day. Many women of color, immigrant voters, LGBT voters, and even disabled voters are facing this. Across industries, many women in America are still earning less than men. In 2020, it was reported that women still make 81 cents for every dollar a man makes, and women are still fighting today for equal rights to their own health care. 11 states in America are rated the bottom states for women's health care, and maternal mortality rates are at an all-time high, actually the highest they've been ever. Despite all of this, we do need to remember that we're celebrating 100 years of women's rights and the fight for equality of all women, and we've achieved quite a lot. The 4 waves of feminism really showcase the power and solidarity and what can happen when you speak up for all of people's rights. So America really stands for liberty and justice, and that's something we all need to remember in our actions, our words, and when we vote. We need to protect all Americans and seek equality for everyone. This is the little art piece that our group put together. It's really of several women organizers breaking through a glass ceiling and taking charge for the work that still needs to be done. Thanks for listening to our group. Bye.